Hello, nerds. Welcome to what is going to be a new video series, though here on the YouTube, you're probably not going to see it quite as often as I plan on doing these videos anyway. This is going to be primarily a patron-only video series, but since I don't really have many patrons at the moment, and it's a new video series, and it's a reason to join the Patreon. The first one is going up on the channel, and the name of the series is that's right, Nerd Rants. So let's preface this real quick with saying Happy New Year, Happy 2020 to everybody watching. This is going to be all about that Happy 2020. The rant herein involved is the fact that we are not actually in a new decade yet. There is a little bit of a contentious viewpoint here, and think we're going to get into things. So let me also preface this in saying that I don't plan on doing a whole lot of research for these things unless it is something that I don't know. I feel like deems a little bit more knowledge on it. This one's relatively straightforward. I did do a little bit of research, but I mean, honestly, we'll get into the ranty bit. But yeah, these are just going to be me voicing an opinion and opening the ground for conversation so that things can happen and maybe minds can be changed and so on and so forth. So today's nerd rant is all about decades and how there was no year zero, therefore we're not in a new decade until 2021. It's the thing that's driven me the craziest about this is that I keep seeing, and let me switch over. Yeah, there we go. Switch over here. So I opened up my YouTube the other day, and sorry, Letterkenny moment. Saw this. I have best camera of the decade and other stuff from 2010 to 2019, and then a decade in film, 2010 to 2019. Now, I understand, and this is not a source of contention. A decade is by and large a general reference to a random grouping of any 10 subsequent years in a row. Absolutely understand that without question. Totally is a thing. Um, but when you're talking about years of time, specifically the way time passes and has for years and years and years, then we get into something different. So let's, before I play the intro again. So what do I mean? Why am I bringing this up? So when doing the little bit of research I did for this, I came to the Wikipedia page, and I'll remove the camera from it here momentarily. But so, first of all, I learned some new vocabulary while doing this. Biennium, triennium, quadrennium, and then lustrum. For some reason is 5 years. I don't know what lustrum is, but there it is, right there. I mean, obviously I do because it's 5 years, but like it seems to not go with the ennium vocabulary. Century also, and then we get back to the ennium when we hit a millennium. So yeah, that was fun. Anyway, usage. The according to Wikipedia, any period of 10 years is a decade. We've already gone over this. There is no quote official legal nor administrative start or end point. So colloquially, yes, technically, in a way, you guys who think we are beginning a new millennium because it is now 2020 are not wrong necessarily, but then this goes on to contradict itself and blah 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 blah. A poll was conducted on December 2nd, 2019, asking almost 14,000 Americans whether the following decade would begin on New Year's Day 2020 or 2021. 64% of Americans answered that the next decade will begin on January 1st, 2020, which was today, and will end on December 31st, 2029, which is the cardinal range. So there are two different ways to count decades, and this is where we get into the discrepancy here on Wikipedia, and therefore the proper and 100% official version of what a decade, of how decades, as far as social time is concerned, uh, ordinal is one way and cardinal is the other. So a cardinal way of telling a decade is starts on 0, ends on 9. That would be 10 years. There was no year 0. Therefore, the first decade of recorded time would not actually be a decade. Every subsequent decade, sure, because there are 10 subsequent years. But because the first decade is not a proper decade, your timeline is messed up. So the proper way to count this would be ordinal, which would mean it starts on the 1, because again, there was no year 0, and goes to 10, which would be 20 in this case, because we are in 2020. Uh, I it it's I don't know. Again, these nerd rant videos are going to just be me ranting about stupid things that are kind of nerdy, and this I feel like is a pretty nerdy thing to be ranting about. But uh, it just was bugging me. I was covering an event last night, and one of the people there that was covering, I think he was technically covering. I don't know. That's a whole other ball of wax. I'm not gonna get into, but uh, walked up to me and said, "We're entering a new decade. It's the Roaring Twenties." Yes, if you look at it cardinally, the 20s begin now. But honestly, even socially, as far as fashion trends, as far as any kind of trends, the decade in that respect isn't going to be in full swing, quote unquote, until we're at least 3 years into the decade. Because if you look at the 80s, 1980 to 1983, a lot of that culture was still very heavily the 70s. You look at the 90s, same thing. You look at the aughts, same thing. You look at the early teens, I guess, same thing. The decade actually flows into the subsequent 10 years, the calendar time, as it flows into the subsequent 10 years for our social time to catch up. So ordinal isn't even like is correct when counting. All right, so time began at this point, and therefore every subsequent 10 years must start on the 1 because there was no year 0. However, cultural influence takes some time to change. Fashion trends, things of that nature, take time to change. Uh, and honestly, they're even going faster than decades. So not quite yet. I take that back. We're not quite faster than decades when it comes to fashion, when it comes to other trends in our society, other colloquial issues. But like back in the first and second decades, there probably was very little different between the first and second decade, and there probably was very little between the 19th and the 20th decade. But now that we're in the, pardon me, now that we are in the 202nd decade, yeah, there's a fair amount of difference from decade to decade, which is one of the reasons why, and this is a whole other rant, but one of the reasons why I feel like the millennial tag that gets put onto everyone who was born from 1981 to the year 2000 is a little bit of a stretch, because from 1981 to 1990, there was a very big difference in the way those kids grew up from 1991 to 2000. There's a vast difference, which is why I don't like calling myself a millennial. I'm more Generation Y. It was how they began calling us, And then I don't know when the millennial thing started happening, but it's now the proper term for somebody who was born approximately the time I was. So that's again, that's a whole other different nerd rant for another day. But that plays into this whole thing. Decades just so we are not into the 203rd decade until next year. So, and I told you I was going to get rid of the camera just so we can get a proper look at this. So let's let's hide this out. So yeah, we are not going to be, I can't see the mouse now. Not going, why does the mouse not? I'm still trying to figure out this Streamlabs thing. Let's see if I can do it quick. And oops. And not to take too much time. Capture cursor says it's supposed to be doing it. So maybe you're seeing it and I'm just hallucinating, but whatever. So yeah, we are not yet into the 203rd decade by the proper ordinal measure of time. We are only into the 203rd decade if you count it by, oh, it's a general idea, sure. But even then, the social again, the social influence does not kick in until we're like 3 to 5 years even into the timeline decade. So this cardinal measure of time is wrong on so many levels. But that is where I fall on the subject. If you disagree with me, by all means, let's have that conversation down in the comments. But this is going to be a difficult one, I think, to change my mind on. I just I don't know why this sticks in my craw so much, but it really does. Uh, if you're looking at the past 10 years, by all means call it we're moving out of the past 10 years, but that's true every year. So the significance of it being 2020 again falls short. There is no significance of it being 2020 if you're just saying, oh, we're changing from the past 10 years, because then 2021, oh, we're changing from a different past 10 years, and then 2022, and so on and so forth, etc., etc. So I feel like if we're going to have a term, we might as well agree on that term, and there's an obvious choice to agree on this term. Uh, that is where I stand. Again, if you disagree, let's have that conversation. Thank you guys for listening to me rant. Again, this is going to be a patron series, so if you want to go check out the Patreon, it is patreon.com/generallynerdy. Website is generallynerdy.net. All kinds of fun things. I am currently still reworking everything. Thank you guys for all of your patience when it comes to all of the new things that I'm trying to implement and the extra time it's taking. Honestly, the next week, maybe 2 weeks, we still probably will likely not see a proper week in nerddom, just because it is taking me a little bit longer to implement changes, and obviously the end screen is going longer than needed to be because there haven't been stuff in the boxes below my face just yet. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. JerryNerdy.net again is the website. Patreon.com/JerryNerdy if you want to subscribe and get more of these nerd rants. They will not always be quite this way. I feel like this is going to just be an outlet for me to get things off of my chest that kind of bug me about the nerd community or bug me about the social community at large. Thank you guys again. And before we go, always remember that if it is generally nerdy, it is probably